Hello and welcome. This is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and in today's training we're going to show you how to zip up and select specific files to zip up and then email those files automatically in a zipped up format. We're going to also be doing the same with folders. So we're going to show you how to zip up entire folders and then email them as well. So it's going to be a great training. Let's get started. Alrighty, thanks so much for joining us today. We've covered a lot in so many videos, but we've never covered how to zip up files and folders in Excel. And then of course we're going to email those. And we're going to be using a very similar file that you've seen. This used to be the contact manager. So we've run this. If you'll see this table and this add new contact, that's all part of contacts. And we've covered that before. So we're not going to cover this today. We're just going to use this as a sample because it's got a nice table. We've covered the ability to add contacts. I'll include the links to these trainings on how we got there in the description below. So if you have not seen the videos before of as far as the contact here file, I'll go ahead and include those. So don't worry about that as far as how to select them, how do we add contacts, how to ID pictures. All that's covered in other trainings, and I'll include the links down below. Today we're just going to focus on how to zip those files, how to zip selected files, and how to email those. So we're going to get that covered. Before we get that covered, I want to make sure that you do get subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you have not yet subscribed, go ahead and click the button below. That way we'll get you videos each and every week. Make sure you also click the notification bell so you can get notified. Each and every Tuesday I bring you new and exciting videos, so I do want to share that with you. Also, if you have not seen it yet, do get a look at our Ultimate Excel Resource Guide. This helps keep our videos for free each week. This includes 1,000 Excel resources, including 100 websites and blogs, 100 YouTube channels, forums and groups. We have free courses, we have books on Excel, tons and tons of great content, including 100 PDF downloads, which is actually over 6,500 pages of PDFs, all for Excel, as well as add-ins and utilities. So if you want to pick that up, please do so. I'll include the links down below. Of course, we also have our reports and graphs dashboard masterclass. This is an amazing 15-hour masterclass. I would love for you to get a look at it. It's a single-click dashboard reports, and it includes tons and tons of features, include date range on reports. It includes profit and loss here, outstanding invoices here. We've got the ability to toggle and turn off and on columns. We also have the ability to create custom reports and install those custom reports and save those. So it's a great application, and it's an amazing masterclass where you'll learn drop-down menus, Excel, PDF, picture. We can save it as or email as a PDF, Excel, and picture. So hopefully you'll get to that. It's really a fantastic course. We've had tons and tons of amazing people that are really happy with it. So if you get a chance, go ahead and look at that. That's a great dashboard class. All right, let's get to it. We've got so much to cover here, so we'll get right started. The idea of this is I want to select a number of files, and then I want the user to be able to zip those files automatically and then email those. And we've got a little email template here. We're going to be putting the attachment, that zipped up file, once it's zipped up, right here. I want to give the user two options. I want to give them the ability to select a specific folder and have all of the contents in that folder zipped up and then emailed. And I also want to give them the ability to select specific files, have those files zipped up and emailed to the contact. In fact, we'll email to whatever selected contact here. And now keep in mind that on this training, our contact row is in B3, okay? So just remember that. That's how we know what email. The email is in I. So the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting these selected files. Basically, when a user selects or browses for these files, we are going to zip all those files up into a single zip file and then email that, and that attachment is going to be included right here. So let's get started on the training today. We're going to go into the code. I'm going to write all the code with you every step of the way. You're going to see exactly how I do it. So I haven't done any coding of as far as the zip files. The only code that contain is the contact macros, and you've seen these before if you've followed. If not, feel free to download it. I'll include the link in the description like with anything else. This training was covered in a prior video, so I'll include include that. So we're not going to cover that today. We're going to cover zip and emails. And that is going to be in this module right here. Of course, if you do not have the VBA, if you do not have the developers tab here to get into the VBA, Alt F11 will get you there. Of course, you can also display the developers tab by clicking on the file options and then going on over to the customize ribbon and make sure developer is selected there. All right, so continuing on, we're going to go into the developers tab and we're going to start writing some code. The first macro is I want the ability to have users select specific files and have those files zipped up and emailed to the customer. So we're going to write some code and then we're going to call this a zip and email files. So we're going to create a subroutine zip and email files. And actually our email portion is going to be on a different sub, but that's okay. We will continue that and we will write that after and then we'll include it in there. So the first thing we want to do, as with all macros, we want to dimension our variables. We've got about 8 or so variables on this about. So we're going to dimension the current date. And why do we want to dimension the current date and time? Because I want to name these zipped files using the current date and time so that we don't have duplicate zip files, which could create a problem. So we're going to use the minutes and seconds so that way you never have a duplicate zipped file. So we're going to name that as string. So we're going to add the current date and time on our file. We also want to dimension the default file path. That's going to help us create the zip in a temporary location. We're going to use the default file path as a string, and that's a default file path as string. Okay, that's the default location for that zip file, and it can get deleted too once we're done with it. So we're okay with that. And then we want to know what files to zip. We want to know the file zip, so we're going to dimension that. Dimension files to zip as string. That's going to be a string as well. And now what I want to do is I want to create a shell application as an object. That shell application is going to help us create our object for attaching those files and duplicating them, because we've got to basically take the files, duplicate them into a zip file, and then they'll be zipped once they're zipped up. So we'll dimension a shell app as an object. Okay, we're going to go late binding. So late binding, just object for now, and then we're going to go ahead and create that object a little bit later on in our code. Dimension the file count. I also want to count the number of files that are going into our zip folder. So we're going to count that, and we want to count that as long. So file count as long. As we want to track the number of files, and also want the same thing, a file number. We want a file number, same thing, is also going to help us count and track the number of files. So file number as an integer in this case. And then next up, we also want to do the file names, and that's going to be a variant in this case. So we're going to dimension the file names because we may use them as a variant, as an array. So as variant. Okay, so we want to make sure that one's variant because that's going to be all the files together, and it's going to be. We also want to dimension a varray. That's going to help us also with our array, just in case we need that. ARR as the variant. Also, and then lastly, we want to dimension the zip file name. That's the completed file name, also as a variant. Zip file name as a variant. Okay, so we've got some variants in there that are going to help us continue on. All right, now we're ready. We're going to be focused on with sheet 1. There's not really too much code we're going to writing on the sheet because this is all focused on based on the user selection. Let's just say we may not even need to do with sheet because this particular, now when we write the email, we're going to be focused on sheet 1. But here the only thing we're going to be doing is when we get this macro completed, the only thing on sheet 1 really with this portion of the macro is I'm going to be placing the attachment right here, Q18. We're going to place that long file name, that zip file right here, Q18. So that's really the only thing we're focused on sheet 1. Everything else is based on the user selection. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. The default path, I want to set up the default path equals, we'll just use the application default file path. And that default file path is generally your documents or something like that generally. So it's a good location that's always there so we can use it. You can also use like default, like your current workbook path. That's another location you can use. And then I also want to make sure that this path ends in a backslash here. So to do that, I want to check if it's there. If not, I want to add it. So if the right of the default, we've now defined it, default file path, default path, not path, default path and then 1. So what I'm looking for the last character. What is the last character? If it does not equal a backslash, let's add it. We want to make sure that it does. Okay, so if it does not equal a backslash, then what do we want to do? Then default path equals, and actually when I write these variables, I like to do like this. Sometimes I go all small, default path, and then watch it change. Equals default path, and then we'll include a backslash, just so we can make sure, because that's really important, because we're going to need to add on to that. So we'll go ahead and take care of that. All right, so we've got that covered now. Now let's set the current date. We've got that, remember, as a current date and time. So we'll do current date time equals to, what does it equal to? And I also want to format this. Format. Now format doesn't always work. Format doesn't always work in some locations, and but it usually works. I think in 2007 it doesn't work, but you can use application.worksheet function.text also. Okay, so that works too. So we'll use format for now. I think it'll work on all of them, but there's some older versions it doesn't always. Just keep that in mind. You can use application worksheet function text as well, so that works just as fine. So what do we want? We'll want now, which is the current time, and then I just want to give it a format. You can set your format to anything you want. I'll do day and then month. Well, we can do, let's do year, and then so that it's all automatically, then month, and then let's just say day, and then we'll go ahead and add a space, hour dash minute, and then seconds. This way it's going to make sure that each time we add the current date onto a file name, it's always going to be unique. And that's the idea here. We just want unique file names and unique zip file names. All right, so now we can set the zip file name. The zip file name is equal to the default path and zipped files, and then we'll go ahead and add on top of that the current date and time, and the current date and time, and what do you want? Make sure it's got to end in .zip, so that's important. .zip, okay, .zip for the zip file. All right, so we've defined our zip file name. It's going to be the default path plus the zip files and the current date and time, so that way it's going to be unique each time. So we've set that. Now what we want to do is we want to browse for the files. Let's type in browse for the files. And then remember, when we're browsing for the files, just a reminder, and select multiple files. This is just a comment using control key. It's just control key, okay? Because we can, when you select multiple files, you can. So that's going to, so we'll set the file names. Remember, this is a variant because it's going to be an array, right? File names equal to application dot get open file name. Right, we're going to open file name. And now what are the options? We don't want any filter. If you want a specific filter, you can, like if you only want Excel files or you only want Word documents, but we're not going to set it. We're going to set it for anything. So there will not be any particular, but we do want multiple select. You see how it said multi-select? Multi, that's very important. Select equals true, because we want to make sure that's very important, obviously. True. And then we can give it a title. And what do we want the title to be? We can have the title, we can call it equal select files you want to zip an email. Okay, so we can set the title equal to select files you want to zip an email. Okay, that's going to be the title, just so we know. We don't need to capitalize this. Okay, so we've got our title down and we're ready to go as far as that. And now we're done with that. Now we want to make sure, I just want to make sure that they've selected something in case they have not, in case there's an issue. So we're going to check that if it's not an array, then just exit out of step. If we're going to check is array, use is array file names, we want to make sure this is an array, meaning it's for sure correct and not blank, equals false. Then what do we want to do? Then just exit the sub. Okay, so then we continue on. So now if it's not, now we can continue on. All right, so that way it's just going to exit completely out if there's some issue with that. All right, and let's say I want to create a blank zip file. What we're going to do is we're going to be creating an empty zip file. And to do that, you could just, I'll show you how we would do that in the desktop. Like I would right click on something here. So new, and then compressed zip file. So what that's going to do is create a brand new zip file just like this. So this is what we're going to do in the code. So here we have our zip file. It's called new compressed, and if we open it up, there's nothing in here. That's what I want to do through the code. I want to create a zip file and I want it to be empty. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add items to it. Like we're going to take items and we're going to drag it in here. And so that's basically what I'm going to do, except I'm going to copy them in here so that when we add items to the zip file, it's just like that. You see how we've done that? But we're going to do that through the code. So we're just going to take files and we're just going to add them into the zip file just like that, but through the code. Then we have our zip file with files added in, just like I've added here. Or if I take this one and I add it into the zip file, so we're just going to go through all the ones the user selects and add them into that zip file. So that's what we're going to do. We can delete this now. We're done with this sample. So that's what I want to do, but I want to do it in the VBA code. So the first step we want to do is we want to get the user to select, which we have done already. And the next thing I want to do is I want to create that empty zipped file. So create an empty zipped file. And we can do that through this. If the length, we want to make sure directory of the zip file name is greater than 0, then that means it exists. And if it exists, then we need to kill it. Kill zip file name, because if that zip file, for some reason, although it shouldn't, if it exists, it would create a problem, it would create a bug. So we're just going to remove any zip file that has that name. So we're going to kill it, which means delete it. All right, so now that we are sure that there's no specific zip file with that exact name in that directory, we can move on. So now we can open a zip file. Now we're going to open zip file name for output as number 1, and that's going to create that file. And then we're going to print number 1, which in Windows code prints it, number 1. And next we're going to enter a set of characters that tells Windows to create this zip file. And it's basically PK and then the inquiry and then the ACK and the and sign. So that's basically the code, and I'll put that up on the screen so you can see that, what that is. And it basically goes like this: character, $80, that character, which of course is the P actually. And then what we're going to do is and character. Again, these are character sets. You just have to understand this is the code to create that specific file. And then we're going to use 75, and that's K. And what else? And then we're going to use CHR5, CHR, and then 5. And that is the ENQ, the percentage. Okay. And next up, and what else? And then the last one is the and sign. And then that is CHR6. Okay, so we've got that. And this is just the code that's going to tell us and what else. And then what I want to do is I want to add in 18 zeros. Why? That's just the code. So that's the code that tells Windows to create that zip file. String, 18 instances of 0. So that and then once we're done that, we can close number 1. So this line of code, all this does will create a blank zip file, and that's just the following data. So I've created those strings. So 18, so we have the P, the K, a percentage, the and sign, and 18 instances of 0. That'll create our zip file. Okay, so we're now ready to move on. Now we can focus on the shell application. We can set the shell app equal to create object shell application, shell dot application. Okay, that's going to create our shell application, and we're going to set a file number to 0. It's going to start out 0, so we want to make sure we set that starting at 0, because we're going to count the number of files, so we need to know it's 0. We're going to run our loop. We're going to run a for next loop. For the file count is equal to L bound. What is L bound? That's the lower bound in our array, the lower portion of array, because we want to go the low bound. What is our array? Our array is file names. Remember, this is the array that contains all of our file names. L bound, so it's going to start at the lowest portion to the top portion, to the highest value. So that way we cover every single file in our array. So the file can use the lowest portion to the highest portion, which is upper, U bound. U bound file names. That's going to cover it. So basically, if we've attached 10 file names, if we've attached 10 files, it's going to go from 1, which is the first one, to 10. And next, file count. Okay, so that's going to close our loop. We always want to close our loop. All right, so we've got that covered. Now we've got a loop. So now what do we want to do? Now within this loop, I want to add files to our zip file. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we're going to set the file number. What is the file number? We need to keep track of that. The file number is equal to the file number plus 1. It starts out at 0, so the first one's going to be 1 plus 1. So now the first one is 1. So now we can move on. Now the shell app.namespace zip, here's the line, zip file name dot copy. We're copying that file, copy here, copy it to the file names. Which one are we copying? File count, and this is going to copy it to our zip folder. There we go. Okay, let's see what's next. All right, so we've found the file. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure, I want to run a little bit of a loop just to make sure, because it takes some times for, it doesn't happen immediately for those files. If they're big files, it can take a little bit of time to zip that up. So we want to give that copying, if it's a large file, it'll take a little time to compress the file. So what we want to do is we want to add a little bit of time into that just to make sure. Keep script waiting until compressing is done. Okay, and so how do we do that? Well, first of all, let's write on error new zoom next, just in case there's an issue. Okay, and if there's an issue, now we said we're going to use a do until loop. Do until when? Shell app dot namespace, right? Namespace. Now which name? Zip file name. That zip file name dot items count. So we're going to, on that specific count, equals file number. And why is that? Do until. So for example, we're on file number 5, and we've only counted 4, but we're on file number 5, right? We're on the 5th file, but we're still, the application is only counting 4. That means it's not done yet, right? It's not done. It's not done compressing. So as soon as the count hits 5, that means it's done. The file's already compressed and already moved into the folder, because now we're at 5. So now we're at the file number, now the number of count. So if it's still counting 4, that means it's not completed yet. So we're going to run this loop until the count equals 4. So that's going to be really, really helpful, so that we can never have a problem. It's always, we don't skip files. So that's great. And what are we going to do inside the, well, I want to add a little wait in there. Application dot wait, and then maybe so now plus 1 time value, and then we'll add a little bit of a time, just so maybe just a split second there, just so we can, it doesn't miss any if we don't add the time in. So we're going to add a second in there. Okay, so we've added that in. So now it's going to wait that 1 second until it's done. So it's going to loop through that, and that's what it's going to do. So now we're good. Now we can, just in case there's an error, now we can write on error go to 0, so we can close that error loop there. So now that's closed, and now we can continue on to the next file number. So now we've got next file count. Okay, so this is our loop right here. So all it's going to do, it's going to go from the first file that we've selected to the last file that we've selected. It's going to copy those files from its current location into the new location, and then it's going to wait until it's fully compressed and copied in until it moves on to the next one. So that's all that we're doing right there in the loop. And once we're done, now we're done, right? Now everything, after it's gone through every single item, we are done. So all we need to do is put sheet1.range Q18. Remember, that was our Let's just take a look just so you remember. That's where our attachment's going to go, Q18. That's where our email attachment's going to go. So the next macro that we're going to write is going to take the attachment from Q18. So we're done with that. So that's, now I want to put that Q18 dot value equals zip file name. Okay, there we go. Now let's see if that works. We'll check it out and let's see if there's any bugs. We'll run that. Default path, let me fix that. Default path, file path, it should be default file path. So I'm just going to find that wherever I replace it and then paste it in there and then replace it with, that should be default file path, just so we default file path, just so I can replace all instances of it. Okay. All right, so now we've got the default file path. Let's go ahead and continue down on that and see if there's any other issues that we have. And kill, that's got to be one more L in there. Continue on. And then shell app. Okay, that's got to be correct. One more P here. Okay. And let's take a look here. File name, that's got to have an S at the end of that. Okay, and continue. Wow, lots of bugs, huh? See, that's what happens when I write quickly. Okay, oh, we need to bring this up a line. We're copying that, but that's part of the same. Okay, so let's continue on. What else is there? And then one more L here. Lots of misspellings here. Just continue on until we fix all of our bugs. Application, again, spelling here. Okay. All right, we're good to go. Now we've selected it. Now we can, there's no more bugs, so we've clicked on here. We'll click on some specific files. Let's go ahead and we can look on here. We'll use these two PDFs, click open, and we'll see how we did. Now we just have to go into and here is our zip file here. Let's take a look at this. Here is our zip file right here, our path. It looks correct. Zip files, the date, the month, and everything. We've got everything there. That looks correct. So let's just go browse for that just so we can check to make sure it's correct. And we have those two files inside there. So all I need to do is put that in the browser, open it up, and we have our two PDFs. Okay, great. So that's working now. Now I want to email that. So we can use that as a separate sub for that. So let's write a code to email that. So now we have everything in the place. And let's write an email so we can create an email and attach this. This is the easy part. We've done this a few times before, but for those of you who haven't seen, I'm happy to show that to you. All right, let's get to that. Back into the code we go, and we'll scroll down and we'll write another macro. In this one, we'll call this email zip file. So sub email zip file. And of course, we want to dimension out a few things, just as we always do. We're going to dimension the Outlook application and late binding Outlook app as an object. And of course, we want the email as well. The email app, let's call it Outlook email as an object as well. And then, I need to know the contact row. That's the row. We're going to pull that in. So that's going to be long dim contact row as long, because that's the row. I believe it's in B3 that we're going to have to define that. B3, correct. Okay, so we need to know that row. That's important. So we can pull the email address. And next up, we want to also dimension the first name. You can add more. I just added the first name as string. Okay, so we've got that, and now we're ready. Now we want to set the contact row. We can do, in this case, we can do contact row equals sheet1.range b3 dot value. Okay, so that's going to be our contact row. We need to know that. And the next up, we'll dimension the first name. First name is equal to, what is it equal to? Well, our first name, we know the row, right? So if our first name is located in column D, and we know the row, so if we want to get David, it's going to be D19. So D and whatever the contact row is, D and B3 contact row. So that's all we need to do. So the first name is equal to sheet1 range D and the contact row dot value. First name. You can add last name. You can add a lot to this. We'll just keep it basic because I want to show you the real cool thing with the zip folder as well. We still have to write that. All right, so just in case, if the contact row equals 0, then exit the sub. We need to make sure that it's actually has a value, so that's important. First name, we got that covered. And next up, we're going to set the Outlook application equal to late binding, create the object. What kind of object are we creating? We're going to create an Outlook application. Outlook.application. All right, and next up we're going to set the Outlook mail. Outlook email equal to Outlook application dot, what is it? Create item. It's going to create an email. Create item 0. That's going to be an email. That's going to create our email. And now we are ready to say with the email, what are we going to do with it? Well, we just want to create an email. With Outlook mail, what do we want to do? Well, we need to set a to, who are we going to email it to? Equals sheet1 dot range. I is the email column. I is the email column. That's what we know, the contact row, but what about the email? That's an I. That's where all of our emails are located. So that's what we're going to use. I in the contact row. That's going to get us our emails. I in the contact row dot value. That is the email. So that is our email for our to. Next up, we wanted to send the attachments. Actually, we should probably, just in case, if we don't want to add it, just in case it was blank, it might create an error. If sheet1 dot range q18 dot value does not equal blank, then we can add attach. Then dot attachments dot add. Then we can add this. That's what we're adding, just to make sure if it's not blank. Then add that as an attachment. Okay, next up we need to add our subject. Dot subject equals, what is it? Sheet1 dot range. I believe it is q17. q17 is our subject. Dot value. That is our subject. But just in case, what if the user wants to add the first name in the subject? Let's take a look at this here. Here's our subject. And I'll show you this in a second. Basically, the user has the ability to create and display the emails so you can see them, or just send them right away. We'll keep it on display, and I'll show you that. It's just a drop-down list. So our subject is in Q17, but what if I want to put it? I'm just going to use this variable first name so that when the VBA sees this, they're going to replace it with the actual first name. So we can copy that and put that in the subject here. Just so we want to put their name in the subject. What if we want to do that? I want to put a colon. So I want to replace that with the actual first name. So we can use the replace in the VBA to do just that. So the subject equals replace. What are we going to replace? We're going to replace that with what are we going to replace it? First name, pound. And what are we going to replace it with? The first name, the actual first name. First name. This will replace it automatically. And we're going to do the same exact thing for the actual message or the body. So we can copy that. Dot body equals, and then I'm just going to change this from Q17 to Q19. Q19 is where our body is located. So all we're going to do is take that original text, wherever they've put in first name, we're going to replace it with the actual first name. And now I need to know whether we're going to send the email directly or whether we're just going to display it. So we need to run an if-then statement. And let's copy that text right here. I want to copy this right here. If it equals that, then don't send it. So we can write that in the code. If, what field is that? That is Q16. Q16. If Q16 equals create and display emails, then just display the email and don't actually send it. If sheet1.range q16.value equals quotes create and display, then what? Then dot display. We're not sending it. Else dot send. Then it's going to send it. So by changing that value, we're going to know whether the email gets sent automatically or whether it's actually going to get displayed and not sent. Okay, there we go. That's it. And with and sub, we've got that all ready to go. We have a value in there. We can run that and check for any bugs. Let's go ahead and run it. Click the run. And Outlook mail. Okay, that should be email. And let's go ahead and run it again. Okay, it looks good. There's our email. Here's our zip file. Our name is replaced here with our actual name and right here. And our zip file is here. We can double click that and open it, and we can see that it contains our 2 PDFs. Perfect. Okay, so now all we need to do is add that macro, email zip files at the end of our macro above, right? At the end of this one. So once we have put this in, we can create a line, and we just need to add that macro so that this macro now automatically emails. So now when we run this macro, zip and email files, I want to run this macro, but I want to run it on a click of a button. Files, this little icon here, I want to assign it to that specific macro. So I'm going to right click, assign the macro, and then I'm going to click zip and email files, this one here. So now when I click on it, it's going to select those files. Let's go back to our desktop and select something else here. We can click, that looks pretty much the same, but okay, click it, open it, and now it's going to zip them, and it's going to create it, and automatically it's going to create those zip files right here. Of course, this one's got the different time now, so you can see it's a different file name. So that's how we did it. Great. One more I want to show you. What if I want to zip an entire folder? What if I want to select an entire folder and have that zipped and not individual files? Well, I can do that. Let's write a macro to do just that and go back into our VBA code, and let's write a macro for that so we can show you how to select an entire folder and have that zipped up. All right, into the VBA we go. We'll scroll down and we'll create a new macro. We're going to call this sub zip and email folder. That's what I want to do. I want to zip and email the entire folder. This one's actually a little bit simpler. So we started with complex, and we're going to dimension some variables. Again, zip the file name as a variant, just as we did last time, and the folder name and the file folder also as variant. Dim the folder name as a variant. And of course, we also want the actual folder that we're going to be attaching. That's going to be the folder that the user selects. So we'll call that the file folder as variant. And again, I also want to do the current date and time, just like we did last time. So current date time as a string. And then I also want to the default file path, just as we did last time, default path as string. And next up, I want to do a shell application as the object, just as we did before. Dim shell, maybe with less bugs this time, object. Okay, so we've got our dimensions, and then we're going to set the default file path just as we did last time. We can just scroll up here. Default file path. Actually, we used a different default. Let's make this file path just as we did last time. Okay, default file path is application. So we've got that set up. So the default file path is the application. That's important. And of course, we're also going to test it again to make sure that it also contains it. So let's copy that it makes sure that it does contain, just like it did last time, that mark with this line of code here. In fact, we can copy this also as well, because we're going to use that, the current date and time. We need that. We can just copy that down here, just so we don't need to rewrite it again. So we've got the current date and time, and we also want the zip file name, just as we did last time. So we can create that same thing here, except we're going to bring that down here. So now we have the zip file name equal to the default file path, just as we had, zip files and the current. So we're going to use, that's all going to be the same because our results are going to be the same, just that we're going to be bringing in an entire folder, and all the files in that are going to be zipped up automatically. All right, again, so we're going to set the shell application just as we did up here as the create object, so we can copy and paste that. And then bring that down here. All right, so now we're going to be ready to browse to the folder. So let's put in a comment here, browse to folder to zip, which one we want to actually zip. So we can do that with a little bit of code. We're going to set the file folder equal to shell app.browse for folder. And we want a starting point of 0, and then of course we want to select folder to zip. We want the title select folder to zip and email. And then 512, that is the number code that will set our total number for this file. That'll cover that. You can look up the Browse for File folder on Microsoft website to see all the specifications of all the options under Browse for folder. But that'll cover us for now. And then, of course, if we want to make sure that it's not nothing, again, double negative, if not file folder is nothing, then what? Then we can continue on. That means, remember, these two negatives cancel each other out. So that means that if there is actually something in the file folder, then we can continue. Again, we're going to create the empty zip file just as we did last time. So we can copy and paste that. Again, create this empty zip file just like we did last time. No difference with that because it's going to be the same thing. It's just what we're going to put in there is going to be slightly different. So we can copy and paste, create the empty zip file. So the zip file name is greater than 0, then of course we're going to kill it just in case it exists already. We're going to create it, the file, that empty zip file with these 3 lines of code. So now that it's empty, now we can focus on the folder name. The folder name is equal to the file folder dot self dot path. That's going to give us the path of the file name, the folder file. That's going to get us we need to know the entire path of whatever the user has selected, whatever folder, we need to know that path. So we're going to call that folder name. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to make sure we also want to add at the end of this to make sure that there's actually a backslash at the end of that. So again, we're going to test it once again. Running and test if the right of the folder name, the last character, does not equal the backslash, then we want to add it. Backslash, then add it. Then folder name equals folder name, and just add the backslash on to the end of that, and backslash. Okay, so we got that covered just in case it doesn't, because that's very important. We want to make sure that all right, now we're ready to copy the files to the compressed folder and compress those. So we'll write a little note here: copy and compress files into the folder. All right, so now we can say the shell app dot namespace zip file name. Remember, that's our zip file name. Copy here, and what are we going to copy? Shell app dot namespace again, but this time we're going to have a different name. In this time, it's folder name. So that's the one we're going to have, folder name dot items. So we're going to copy them there, copy them to our items. And what do we do? Again, we want to do a wait. I want to keep the script running until all of them have been added in. So we need to run a test. And again, we're going to do a do while loop, a do until loop to make sure that this happens. So we'll write a little note: keep script waiting until compressing is done. And how do we do that? Again, on error, we're going to write an on error, go to next just in case, and wrap that on error 0. And we're going to write everything into that. I use auto hotkey to automate that script. In case you're seeing me auto type it so fast, I use auto hotkey for that. Do until shell app dot namespace zip file name dot items dot count. It's going to count all the items in the folder. So it says basically what we want to do is I want to test when all the items in our original folder equal all the items in our new folder, then we're done. If that count is not the same, then we need to wait and allow it to continue. So equals, all we need to do is run the test. So basically it's just this, but we're just going to change the file, equals the shell app namespace. And then we're going to replace this with folder name. So basically we're counting folder name. So again, we're going to say our original file names, the number of items in our original, when that's equal to our folder that contains our zip folders, when the number of items are equal, then we can continue. Then we're done with the loop. So this is going to continue to wait, but we will need to put a wait now. So what do we want to do inside that loop? Well, what I want to do is I want to continue to wait, and I want to wait just like we did last time. So we can just copy and paste that code. The same wait that we did last time, I'm going to copy that right in here. Okay, so that's the wait. We're going to continue to wait until that's done. I don't use do until or do while loops too much, but in this case, it definitely applies. And then we've got on error go to 0 just in case there's any error, so we can bring that up. All right, so we're good with our loop. Now that's, again, we're done. Sheet1.range Q18, that's where our folder is going to be, our zip file name is going to be .value equals zip file name. There we go. So we're going to copy them right here. This is our original. That's where we're going to copy them into the zip file name. That's our new zipped file. And then of course, we're going to write the same macro. Then what I want to do, I want to email that. So I'm going to copy this macro right here, email zip file, QA team, we're using the same folder. I'm going to paste it right down here. All right, I don't think let's see, okay, perfect. All right, let's take a look. We'll check for bugs and we'll fix any bugs that appear. Zip file name, we're going to add an E onto the end of that. Next up. All right, now we're good to go. So we've got that desktop. Let's just select a folder. I've got some files in here. Click OK, and we'll debug what else we miss in here. And again, put these on the same line. Keep making the mistake. OK, continue on. Perfect. OK. All right, so that's it. That works perfect. Double click on here, open. Let's look, make sure our files, yep, our one single PDF is in there, zipped files. So now we have emailed a single folder. Let's do that again just to double check, make sure everything's working. And now we need to assign it to that button so we can do that from here. Back into there, this is the icon I want to use to zip up specific folders. So we're going to right click on that, assign a macro, zip and email folders, the one we're going to be assigning to that. All right, now that we've assigned it, we can select something. Let's choose another folder in here into the desktop. We can click on the MailerLite, this one here. Click OK, and then there we go. It's automatically done. The zip file is just one item in there. I don't have enough of items. Let's find another one. All right, click on the folder, select a file, select something with some items in it, MailerLite, OK, click OK on that folder, and there we go. Now we're done. And click open, and now it contains 2 PDFs. So that is how you do it. That is how we zip up and email both files and folders. I hope you have enjoyed this lesson. If you have, go ahead and click the like down below. Make sure you've subscribed, and I always appreciate your likes, your follows. If you have any questions, please join our Excel for Freelancers group. We're always here to help you, so we do know you have questions often. And please, if you get a chance, go ahead and check out the resource guide. We'd love it if you could support us in that way. That would be so helpful. So thank you so much, and have a great day.